I never thought I'd find the letter that would destroy my marriage while organizing my daughter's art supplies. But there it was, tucked inside an old sketchbook, yellowed with age and filled with secrets that made my stomach turn. My name is Alara, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought I knew my husband. Mommy, can we paint now? Iris bounced on her heels beside me, her small hands clutching a fresh paintbrush. I forced a smile, quickly folding the letter and sliding it into my pocket. Just a minute, sweetie. Let's finish cleaning up first. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The words from the letter burned in my mind. I'll always love you, no matter what anyone says. We can find a way to be together. The letter wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't even from this decade. But the handwriting was unmistakably Nolan's, and the recipient's name, Sophie, was someone I'd never heard him mention in our 8 years of marriage. Daddy says you make too much mess with the paints, Iris said matter-of-factly, arranging her brushes by size. He told Grandpa Gerald that you should get a real job instead. My cheeks burned. Of course he'd say that to his father. I glanced at my latest canvas propped in the corner of our garage turn studio, half finished and already dismissed by my husband as another hobby piece. The sound of Nolan's car pulling into the driveway made me jump. I heard his shoes on the pavement, his keys jingling, the familiar sounds of my perfectly put-together corporate executive husband returning from another late night at the office. There's my girls. Nolan's voice boomed as he entered, his smile bright, but not quite reaching his eyes. He kissed Iris on the head, then me, and I fought the urge to pull away. Still playing with paints? Actually, I said, my heart pounding, I was thinking about submitting some pieces to that gallery downtown. The one Celeste Harrington curates. Nolan's smile tightened. Honey, we've talked about this. Art is a wonderful hobby, but let's be realistic. You need to focus on what's important. Like Sophie. The name slipped out before I could stop it. The change was instant. Nolan's face drained of color, and for a split second, I saw something I'd never seen before, fear. Iris, sweetheart, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Why don't you go upstairs and get ready for bed? Daddy needs to talk to Mommy. As our daughter's footsteps faded upstairs, Nolan turned to me, his jaw clenched. Where did you hear that name? I pulled out the letter, watching as recognition dawned in his eyes. I think you have some explaining to do. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, a car alarm went off in the distance, and somewhere upstairs, Iris started singing her bedtime song. But in our garage studio, surrounded by my dismissed dreams and newly discovered lies, everything changed. I just didn't know yet how much. The weekly dinner with Nolan's parents always felt like a performance. But tonight the tension was thick enough to cut with the expensive butter knife Vivian insisted on using. I watched my mother-in-law's perfectly manicured nails tap against her wine glass as she studied my latest attempt at looking presentable enough for the Quinn family table. Iris, darling, sit up straight, Vivian corrected for the third time. A proper young lady doesn't slouch. My daughter's shoulders stiffened, her earlier excitement about showing her grandparents her art project fading. I reached under the table and squeezed her hand. Speaking of proper, Gerald cleared his throat, fixing his stern gaze on me. Nolan tells us you're still pursuing this artistic endeavor of yours. The way he said artistic made it sound like a disease. Nolan shifted in his chair beside me, suddenly very interested in cutting his steak. Actually, I said, forcing myself to meet Gerald's eyes, I've been working on some new pieces. There's an upcoming show at Alara. Nolan cut in, his voice carrying that warning tone I'd grown to hate. Maybe we should discuss this later. Why later? The words came out sharper than I intended. Are you afraid I'll embarrass you by talking about my hobby? The room went silent. Even Iris stopped pushing her peas around her plate. Now, dear, Vivian intervened with her practiced society smile. We're just concerned about priorities. A woman's first duty is to her family. Isn't that right, Nolan? Before Nolan could answer, his phone buzzed. He checked it under the table, his face changing for just a moment before he excused himself. Work emergency, he muttered, heading toward the study. That boy works too hard, Gerald commented proudly. Unlike some people who have the luxury of playing with paints all day. I stood up abruptly. my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Iris, sweetie, why don't you show Grandma your science project? As they left the dining room, I started clearing plates, trying to steady my shaking hands. Through the partially open study door, I could hear Nolan's hushed voice. I told you not to contact me here. No, you don't understand. Things are complicated. Sophie, please. The plate I was holding clattered against the counter. Gerald appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You know, he said quietly, Nolan had everything planned out before he met you. A partnership track at the firm, a suitable marriage to someone who understood our world. Then he made some unfortunate choices. My throat tightened. What do you mean, unfortunate choices? The past should stay in the past, Gerald replied, but his eyes flickered toward the study. Unless, of course, someone decides to dig it up. Before I could respond, Nolan returned, his phone tucked away and his mask of composure back in place. But now I could see the cracks in it, the same way I could see the cracks forming in everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Ready to go home? Nolan asked, but his question felt more like a command. I nodded, gathering Iris and our things, but Gerald's words echoed in my mind. The past should stay in the past. But whose past? And what exactly was Nolan trying to hide? The first anonymous letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under my studio door while I was dropping Iris at school. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the contents made my blood run cold. Your husband isn't working late tonight. He's at the Westbrook Hotel, room 412, with her. I stood there, paint-stained fingers trembling as I read it again. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Nolan. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. The universe has a cruel sense of humor sometimes. I spent the afternoon pretending to work on a commission piece, but my brushstrokes kept turning angry and dark. Around 7, I called our regular babysitter. Jessica, would you mind watching Iris for a couple of hours? Something came up. The Westbrook Hotel looked exactly like what it was, a place for secrets. I sat in my car across the street, watching the entrance, feeling simultaneously ridiculous and terrified. At 8:45, a familiar figure walked out. Nolan, his tie loosened, checking his phone. A woman followed a minute later. Young, blonde, elegant in a way I'd never managed to be.
Sophie.
It had to be. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Nolan. Meeting running long. See you at home. I started the car, but instead of confronting them, I drove to the art supply store. It was nearly closing time when I walked in. We're about to close. The clerk started, then stopped when she saw my face. Are you okay? I grabbed tubes of paint, deep reds, midnight blues, storm cloud grays. I need to paint something ugly, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. When I got home, Jessica was reading to Iris. Mommy. Iris jumped up. Look what I drew. She held up a family portrait, stick figures of the three of us, holding hands. My chest tightened. It's beautiful, sweetie. I managed to smile. Time for bed, okay? After tucking her in, I found another letter waiting in my studio. This one had photos. Nolan and Sophie at restaurants, in parks, living a whole separate life, while I'd been trying to hold our family together with both hands. I picked up a brush and started painting, not caring what emerged. Red for rage, black for betrayal, splashes of gold for all the lies that glittered so prettily. Hours passed. My phone kept buzzing with Nolan's updates about his meeting. Around midnight, I heard his car in the driveway. I didn't stop painting. He appeared in the doorway, cologne that wasn't his usual brand clinging to his clothes. You're still up? He frowned at my canvas. What is that supposed to be? I stepped back, really looking at what I'd created. In the chaos of colors, a woman's face emerged, fractured, screaming silently through layers of perfect masks. It was me, I realized. It was also every other woman who'd ever been fed beautiful lies. It's the truth, I said quietly. Would you like to see the reference photos I used? He stiffened, noticing the letters on my workbench. Elara. Don't. I picked up another brush. I'm not finished painting yet. I meant the canvas. I also meant our marriage, his lies, this whole carefully constructed life. Something was ending tonight, But something else, something honest and fierce and entirely mine, was finally beginning. The invitation to Celeste Harrington's birthday celebration arrived like a perfectly timed bomb. Nolan handed it to me over breakfast, watching my reaction with calculated interest. "It's quite an honor," he said, buttering his toast. "Robert specifically requested you create something for Celeste. A painting, naturally." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I looked at the elegant cardstock, remembering how Celeste had praised my work at last year's company Christmas party, while Nolan had quickly changed the subject. "When is it?" I asked, though I'd already read the date. 3 weeks. He checked his phone, frowning at something on the screen. "Try to make it appropriate. Nothing like that disturbing piece you've been working on." My disturbing piece, the one inspired by his affair, sat covered in my studio. I'd been adding to it every night after discovering them at the hotel, each brushstroke a silent scream. The doorbell rang. Another letter, this one containing bank statements. Sophie wasn't just Nolan's lover. She was on his payroll, receiving monthly transfers through a shell company. I was still staring at the papers when my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "The painting is your chance. Show them who he really is." My hands shook as I deleted the message. Whoever was sending these letters knew more than just Nolan's secrets. They knew about the party, about the commission. That afternoon, while shopping for supplies, I ran into Celeste at the art store. She was examining brushes with the same intensity she probably used to evaluate potential investments. "Elara." She smiled warmly. "I was hoping I'd see you soon. Has Nolan mentioned my birthday?" "Yes, I'm honored to." "Don't be honored," she cut in, her voice dropping. "Be honest. That's what I love about art. It reveals truth, doesn't it?" Something in her tone made me look closer. Her smile remained perfect, but her eyes held something else. Knowledge? Warning? "Truth can be dangerous," I said carefully. "So can silence." She selected a brush, testing its weight. "You know, I've always admired how art can tell multiple stories at once. The surface that everyone sees, and the layers underneath that only the observant notice." She paid for her brush and headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Elara? Money is no object for this piece. I want you to create exactly what you feel needs to be expressed." That evening, I stood before a blank canvas, thinking about layers and truth and revenge. Nolan was working late again, probably with Sophie, and Iris was at a sleepover. I picked up my brush and began to paint. Not with rage this time, but with precision. On the surface, it would be beautiful, the kind of piece Nolan's family would approve of. But underneath, my phone buzzed with another anonymous text. "Make him see himself as he truly is." I smiled, adding another subtle layer of shadow to the canvas. Sometimes the deepest cuts are the ones you don't see coming. The painting would be my masterpiece, and my weapon. The painting consumed me. For 2 weeks, I barely slept, working through the night while the house grew quiet with secrets. Each layer held a message, betrayal hidden in brushstrokes, lies woven into shadows. On the surface, it showed a perfect garden party, the kind Vivian would approve of. But look closer, and you'd see the snakes in the grass. "Mommy." Iris's voice startled me from my trance. She stood in the doorway of my studio, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Are you making something scary again?" I quickly covered the canvas. "What makes you think it's scary?" "You look scared when you paint it." She climbed onto my lap, small fingers tracing the paint stains on my hands. "And Daddy looks scared when he watches you paint." My brush clattered to the floor. "Daddy watches me paint?" From the doorway at night. "He doesn't know I see him." Before I could process this, my phone lit up with another anonymous message. "Check his laptop. Password, Sophie 1986. That night, after Iris was asleep, I found Nolan's laptop in his study. My hands trembled as I typed in the password. It worked. Emails appeared, hundreds of them, spanning years. Not just to Sophie, but to lawyers, accountants, discussing offshore accounts, hidden assets. "Working late again?" Nolan's voice made me jump. He stood in the doorway, his silhouette dark against the hallway light. "Just like you've been?" I kept my voice steady, though my heart raced. How is Sophie, by the way? He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. I saw your painting earlier. The one for Celeste. Did you understand it? I understand that you're being reckless. He moved closer, his cologne mixing with something stronger on his breath. Think about Iris. About your comfortable life here. Are you really willing to risk everything over some artistic statement? Are you threatening me, Nolan? I'm reminding you what's at stake. He reached for the laptop, but I held on to it. My family has influence in this town. One word from Gerald, and no gallery would touch your work. Think about that before you do something foolish. A new message buzzed on my phone. Nolan grabbed it before I could, his face darkening as he read. Who's sending these? His fingers tightened around my phone. What else do they know? Enough. I stood up, surprising myself with my steadiness. They know enough. You have no idea what you're dealing with. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that once made me feel sorry for him. Now it just looked calculated. The painting. What exactly have you done? Come to the party and see. I moved past him toward the door. Everyone will. Alara. His voice held a warning but also something else, fear. Don't make me. Make you what? I turned back. Destroy me? Discredit me? Hide me away like your other secrets. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of lies and manipulation. Finally, he spoke. Just remember, you chose this. I walked back to my studio, where my painting waited. Tomorrow was Celeste's party. Tomorrow, everyone would see the truth, including me. The Harrington's ballroom buzzed with expensive perfume and practiced laughter. My painting stood covered in the corner, waiting like a loaded gun. Nolan kept his hand on my lower back, fingers digging in slightly, a warning disguised as affection. Darling, you seem tense, he whispered, his smile never wavering. Last chance to reconsider. Before I could respond, Celeste glided over, champagne in hand. Alara, I've been dying to see what you've created. Gerald and Vivian materialized beside us, along with Robert Harrington and several board members. The perfect audience. Nolan's grip tightened. Well, I said, moving toward the painting, shall we? The fabric fell away. For a moment, silence. The garden party scene sparkled with technical skill, everything the Quinn family had demanded. But then people started leaning closer, noticing the details. In the reflection of a wine glass, a man embracing a younger woman. In the shadows of trees, papers changing hands. In the water of a fountain, faces distorted into masks of deceit. Every betrayal, every lie, hidden in plain sight. Celeste's eyes widened. Extraordinary, she breathed. The layers of meaning, the symbolism. It's garbage. Nolan cut in. Amateur symbolism trying to pass as depth. Alara, you've embarrassed yourself. Have I? I turned to face him. Look closer, darling. Maybe you'll recognize yourself. Gerald stepped forward, his face darkening as he studied the painting. This is outrageous. Robert, surely you can't. Actually, Celeste interrupted, I find it fascinating, particularly these details here. She pointed to the fountain's reflection. Those numbers in the water, they look remarkably like banking codes. Nolan's face went pale. Robert Harrington moved closer, adjusting his glasses. You're right, dear. In fact, they look exactly like. Enough. Nolan grabbed my arm. This is ridiculous. Alara's been unwell lately, imagining things. Like your meetings with Sophie? The words rang out across the suddenly quiet room. Or the offshore accounts. Or how about? His hand struck my face before I could finish. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. In the ringing silence that followed, I heard familiar footsteps. Mommy? Iris stood in the doorway, still in her party dress. She was supposed to be with the nanny upstairs. Why did Daddy hurt you? Everything froze. Nolan released my arm, reaching toward our daughter. Sweetheart, it's not. Don't touch her. My voice shook, but my feet carried me forward. Don't you dare touch her. Security. Robert Harrington's voice cut through the tension. Please escort Mr. Quinn out. As guards approached, Nolan's mask finally cracked. You'll regret this, he snarled. Both of you will. I'll make sure you never see her again. I pulled Iris close as they led him away, her small body trembling against mine. The painting loomed behind us, all its hidden truths now exposed to the light. But at what cost? Celeste appeared beside me, her hand gentle on my shoulder. Come with me, she said quietly. Both of you. We need to talk. I followed her from the ballroom, feeling everyone's eyes on us. The night wasn't over yet, and somehow I knew the worst was still to come. Celeste's private study felt worlds away from the chaos of the ballroom. Iris had finally fallen asleep on the leather couch, exhausted from the night's events. I sat across from Celeste, holding a glass of water that couldn't wash away the taste of fear. The anonymous letters, Celeste said quietly, they were from me. The glass nearly slipped from my hand.
What?
Sophie was my sister. She pulled out a photograph, a younger Celeste with a familiar blonde woman. She died 3 years ago. Suicide, after Nolan ended their relationship and threatened to expose her if she didn't disappear. Before I could process this, Robert burst in. Police are here. They found evidence of extensive fraud in Nolan's accounts. Gerald's implicated too.
He looked at me.
But that's not our biggest problem. Nolan's filed for emergency custody of Iris. The room spun. He can't. He can try, Celeste cut in. But we have evidence of his financial crimes, the affair, and now witness accounts of physical abuse. Plus, she smiled grimly. I've been recording everything since you walked into my art store that day. A commotion outside made us turn. Through the study windows, I saw Nolan arguing with police officers in the driveway. He looked up, caught my eye, and started running toward the house. Take Iris to the safe room, Robert ordered, moving toward the door. But before anyone could react, Nolan burst in. You planned this, he snarled at me, then turned to Celeste. You vindictive bitch. You orchestrated all of it. No. I stood, placing myself between him and Iris. You did this. Every lie, every betrayal, they were your choices. Choices. He laughed bitterly. You want to talk about choices? I gave you everything. A perfect life, security, status. You gave me a cage. My voice grew stronger. Then punished me for wanting to fly. How poetic. He stepped closer. But let's see how well you fly when I'm done with you. No judge will grant custody to an unstable artist who what? Celeste interrupted, holding up her phone. Who has video evidence of your crimes? Who has Sophie's suicide note? Who has recordings of every threat you've made tonight? Nolan's face contorted. He lunged forward, not at me, but toward sleeping Iris. I moved without thinking, my body blocking his path. We crashed into Celeste's desk, pain shooting through my shoulder. Security. Robert's voice boomed. Guards rushed in, restraining Nolan as he thrashed and shouted. This isn't over, he spat as they dragged him away. You're nothing without me. Nothing. I watched him disappear, feeling strangely calm. Actually, I said to the empty doorway, I'm an artist. Iris stirred on the couch. Mommy, are we going home? No, sweetheart. I gathered her in my arms, looking at Celeste. We're going somewhere better. Your painting, Celeste said softly. It's already sold. To an anonymous buyer who's very interested in funding your first solo show. I held Iris closer, thinking of all the paintings yet to come. Not born of revenge anymore, but of freedom, of truth. Thank you, I whispered, but Celeste shook her head. Don't thank me. You did this. Your art told the truth when words couldn't. Outside, police lights painted the night in red and blue. Inside, I held my daughter and felt, for the first time in years, like I could finally breathe. 6 months later, I stood in the gallery surrounded by my work, not just the painting that changed everything, but dozens of new pieces. Each canvas told a story of transformation, from darkness to light, from silence to truth. Iris twirled in her new party dress, greeting guests with a confidence I'd always hoped she'd find. Mommy, she tugged at my sleeve, pointing to her favorite painting, a bright, abstract piece titled Freedom. Can I tell them what it means? Of course, sweetheart. As she chatted with admirers, Celeste appeared beside me. The Times critic just left. He's writing a feature. I never thought I'd be here, I admitted, watching Iris gesture animatedly about color theory to an impressed collector. Sometimes I still expect to wake up back in that house, trying to make myself smaller. Speaking of houses, Celeste handed me an envelope. The sale closed. It's officially yours. My new studio gallery space, paid for with the proceeds from my first show. No more garage studios or borrowed corners. Just room to create, to breathe, to grow. A commotion near the entrance drew our attention. Vivian Quinn stood there, looking smaller somehow without her usual armor of superiority. I'll handle this, Celeste started, but I touched her arm. No, it's okay. Vivian clutched her handbag as I approached. I know I'm not welcome, she said quickly. I just needed to see. See what? If it was real. Her eyes swept across the gallery, lingering on Iris. All those years, we thought we knew what was best, what success looked like. She turned to a painting, one showing a woman breaking free from golden chains. We were wrong. Before I could respond, she pressed a letter into my hand. Gerald's pleading guilty. He's cooperating against Nolan. She swallowed hard. And I found Sophie's old journals. The things my son did. I'm not interested in revenge anymore, I said quietly. No, she looked around the gallery again. You found something better. After she left, I opened the letter. Inside was a photo, Nolan and Sophie as teenagers, looking happy, normal, in love. Before ambition and family expectations twisted everything. Mom, Iris called out. Someone wants to buy my favorite. I tucked the photo away, moving toward my daughter. The past would always be there, but it no longer had power over us. Later, as the gallery emptied, I found one last note tucked into the guest book. The handwriting matched the anonymous letters that had started everything. Art speaks truth to power. Never stop painting your truth. S. I smiled, remembering Sophie's face from the photograph. Maybe she'd found peace too, knowing her story helped free someone else. Ready to go home? I asked Iris, who was yawning beside her beloved painting. Can we get ice cream first? Absolutely. As we left the gallery, our reflections caught in the window, mother and daughter, walking tall, heading toward something new. The revenge I'd sought had transformed into something unexpected. Redemption. Not just for me, but for everyone touched by the truth finally brought to light. I squeezed Iris's hand, feeling the future unfold before us like a blank canvas, waiting for our colors to make it whole.